It had been too long since pilot Lacey J. Fence had stepped foot in a time slipper. Nearly 5 years, in fact. 100 years ago, when the technology was invented, she would have been too old, at 45, to go on missions. The giant beast of a machine whirred and grinded as the cabin connected itself to her biosuit. The gears and emergency release lay by her feet, just in case. Time travel wasn't nearly as simple as movies and books had made it out to be. For starters, it didn't happen in a flash. When the original time slipper was created, it took the same amount of time to travel into the past as it took to live through it. The first time pilot travelled 25 years into the past and felt every single one of them on the way back. It aged him almost beyond recognition. The technology has improved since then. Now it only ages the person a quarter of the time they slip. That's part of the reason it was called slipping. Still, only available to the wealthy few and government officials, slipping had its own rules and regulations. Time was now its own nation, ruled by the same thing as everywhere else: power. A voice over the speakers broke Fence from her thoughts. "Fence, do you read?" called Fence's billionaire inventor and crazy American friend Wendy Trickler. "All the time," Fence replied with a grin towards the hidden dash camera. "Don't you get smart with me, young lady," Wendy replied, but there was humour in her voice. "It's not too late for me to pick someone else." Fence laughed. "We both know this is too important for anyone else." And it was. Wendy and her team had managed to halve the aging process of time slipping. Now all they had to do was test their theory. The time they'd chosen for the trip was a safe zone, a time without any kind of turmoil or historical significance whatsoever. 100 years into the past, and she would only be affected by about 12 of them. Fence settled back into her restraints. This was going to be fun. It took Fence exactly 2 seconds to realise something had gone seriously wrong. There were 2 reasons she came to this conclusion. One of them was the loud blaring of several alarms and an animated voice intoning, "Welcome to March 19, 2020. The second, and much more concerning reason, was the fact that she was hanging upside down, held up only by her restraints. Her long purple hair was dangling into her face. She blew on it to try clearing her vision. It didn't work, and she had to blindly search for the emergency release with her foot. With a hiss and the click of metal, her restraint sprung free, and it took all her years of training not to fall directly on her head. Clinging to her seat with her arms, Fence swung herself out onto the ceiling of the time slipper. Taking a deep breath, Fence assessed her situation. "Okay, Fence, you are about 50 years further into the past than when you were supposed to be. In a time period of a global pandemic and major social and economic unrest. And somehow, just as people started to go really nuts." Fence looked at her screens, which, although upside down, seemed to still be in perfect condition. As usual, her monitor had several major news events of the next 3 days posted across it. The difference was, where usually there were severe weather events and car crashes, the news seemed to be an unusual mishmash of insanity and panic. Somehow this managed to be both funny and almost more depressing than the death and destruction that was reported on daily. This was a time of complete chaos, and clearly... Fence paused for a second and zoomed in on a particular image. "Okay, so..." Fence had paused on a list of the current SA and border COVID restrictions. Squinting and tilting her head, she read them again. And again. "No vertical consumption of alcohol." Fence suddenly imagined an entire pub of people laying down on the floor to chug their drinks. Shaking her head to clear it, she moved on to border restrictions. For some reason, it seemed anyone could enter New South Wales, but no one could leave again, because every other state was intent on closing their borders. Why? What drunk penguin came up with these rules? Her answer came with her next click as she realised it wasn't one penguin. It was at least 7. In this time period, the health ministers seemed to have all of the power, but instead of working together in a logical and well thought out manner, they had turned into feuding warlords and were currently fighting like toddlers over a particularly interesting toy. Except the toy just happened to be an entire country on the brink of collapse. Fence took another deep breath and massaged her forehead. If there was one thing she could never quite understand, it was the decisions and actions of politicians. The next thing to pop up on her screen was COVID comedy. Fence had to shake her head. If there was one thing Australians were good at, it was laughing at their problems. There were pages and pages of comedians, funny videos, and memes, all of them making fun of the panic and discord, the way things had been handled. Not to be mean, well, most of them, but because if nobody laughed at the utter ridiculousness of the whole situation, then nobody was going to make it out still sane. Fence couldn't decide whether she was impressed or disappointed in humanity. Even though everything was falling apart around them, people seemed to be trying their best to get back to some version of normal. Vaccinations were on the horizon for Australia, and even though Fence knew from history class that things escalated from there, the world didn't yet. They still had hope that everything would be solved in a couple months, that the world would forget all about COVID-19. A green light flashed across Fence's screen indicating an incoming transmission from the mission base. Fence accepted the call and Wendy's voice exploded at maximum volume through the speakers. "Are you okay, Fence?" Fence couldn't help but roll her eyes, a smile pulling at her lips. "No need to be dramatic, Wendy. We both know I've been in worse crashes. You caused at least half of them." There was a pause. "You promised not to bring up the 1918 thing again," Wendy eventually mumbled. Fence's smirk turned into a grin. "And you promised to take me on a nice, relaxing vacation." When Wendy replied, she seemed to have moved past the jab. "Yeah, well, this time we equip your shuttle with an emergency skip engine, one of the perks of being on a prototype. If you want to get back in your seat, we'll send you home." Despite herself, Fence paused. Even if she wasn't in the best place and time, she had still given up 12 years to travel here. There was no way she was going home without looking around. Turning to the camera, Fence raised an eyebrow at her oldest friend. "You know me better than that. Let's see what 2020 has to offer." "Fence, you're in a red zone. You could be arrested. Do not leave the time slipper." Pulling the lever for the door release, Fence called over her shoulder. "Since when do I play by the rules?" Just before the door closed behind her, Fence raced back inside. "Whoops!" she yelled, grabbing something from a compartment. "Forgot my mask."
The sunlight was brighter than our futures the day we had to face it. Hair up, head down. The teacher asked us to address it. Write a poem, write a story. How is the world going to take it? Shut the borders. It seemed so simple, yet I was told, "Poppy, that's racist." The dancing butterflies in my stomach grew to bees. The hope that once lived inside me, now a fragile seed. I know I can't touch yesterday, yet it still touches me. Yes, the sun will rise again, yet it feels all the same to me. Pray for my plans and remind myself whatever will be, will be. Yet, when will the world go back to how it used to be? At first, I missed running at Santos. I thought, I'll get over that. Lost a few more things here and there. They were minor looking back. Year 10 camp would have been a blast that we never got to hack. Snow trip hit a tough bump in the road that ran us off the track. As time moved on, I couldn't stay paralysed in the past, dwelling on opportunities that fell by the wayside too fast. Adding it up, one missed opportunity was clearly surpassed. Yet all's well that ends well, it's only ever going to last. When will the world go back to how it used to be? I'm tired of seeing nothing for the things I've achieved. The prospect of it turning to dust always sparks anxiety, and it's robbed my mum of so many precious memories. Chances she'll never get back, glances she'll never see. It's hard, so hard to have hope and continue to believe that this world will one day be back to how it used to be. I know I haven't had it as hard as some. I'm grateful for that. Doesn't mean I'm unaware of the things I'm never getting back. I'm the type to see the glass half full. I'm afraid this one has a crack. If there was doubt about youthful resilience, this should put us on the map. 5 days, only 5 days was the difference between one very happy girl and one with crushed dreams. It was never going to work out, that's what it seems. I got my hopes up to watch them fall, far beneath. When will the world go back to how it used to be? We never knew how good we had it. Freedom is a blessing. If one good thing has come from disturbing our peace, it's that we've remembered what matters, love and family. Enjoy one thing at a time, gone are the days of certainty. Take a deep breath, you can breathe. When will the world go back to how it used to be?
Take a breath. It might be the last one you take. The air of desolation is sponged out by blackest black smoke and red skies growing darker. A storm is coming and clouds careen like fingers, filling the intoxicating space which seemed to go forever and now seems so finite. Breathe out, darling. Storm is coming, breaking through the hot, choking air that looms over, once wildness and fury and running through lands of sand and rain and grass, now thick and blood red, tasting more and more of guilt with every swallow. Sharp like the point of a blade, breaking the skin, spilling and spitting, fierceness and frenzy, pouring out, a protruding dagger from an open wound, draining all what once was, and now she can't breathe. Breathe in. Breathe out. It played with her, teased an ending and a beginning. A tempest and a downpour come to quench the blaze, leaving gnarly, strangled trees, fractured violence, half-spilled blood, devastated revelation. Her devastation. Forgetting the tears from her eyes, like the razored edges of the storm, clinging to something that used to smell and taste so sweet and now sours in her mouth. Anger? No. Pain? No. Breathe in. The pain is fear made solid and thick and raw, and fear seeps out of the cuts and nicks, sculpted anger red hot and greasy slick. Anger so hot it fizzes and spits blue and red, like scalding heat from butter in a pan. Words from the mouth that cut and slice like dirty iron anguish. It's the feeling of being angry and sad and in pain and sick and tired and silent. Tired like exhaustion that finds the blackness of both eyes and knuckles in the half-light like violence. Brutality, scalding and powerful, viciousness sits on your lips and your gut and your heart like tar, no cure, grating at the smile that carries it in the silence. Gagging, putrefying radiance, holding space for what was, what could be, what will never be, should be, or can be ever again. Pain is white hot and screaming through balled fists and broken promises that made new will be broken again. Breathe out. Sadness comes like waves. Tightness in a chest that fear holds subsides to make room for what is ugly and soft sadness. Blacker than the clouds that threaten the lands on which you stand your stoic heels, she makes the breath sluggish and painful like ash in her mouth, a smile too heavy and too soon, and laughter too much to bear. Altogether too much. Again, breathe in. Breathe out. Fight back. Run faster. Turn back. Go back. Stay together. Stay alive. Anguish is silence deep within the graying clouds of the storm as it grows. Thunder pounds like fists on raw iron bars. The prisoner shriek, living in her ribcage, sensations of life begging to break free but cannot. She cannot breathe. Breathe in. Power. Empower. Overpower. Infinite in that power. Powerful. Present. Presence. Peace. A breath held underwater. If the thunder comes, then so too does the lightning. Breathe in. The force and the words and the pain and the pounding cannot be stopped once it's begun. The vice grip of anguish holds the sounds back, and so too the lightning. The words are fire, unstoppable, destructive, daring, devastating. Darling. The silence screams and fills choking lungs to spill forth from empty lips. Overflowing smoke in the lungs of the animals and the trees and the one who wants to run but knows they have to stay. Stand in the darkness and in the pain and in the smoke of the front while it passes. Burns over. Breathe out. Breathe in. Linger. In the haze and the fog that remain when the storm is over. When the violent anger and the pain subside and only the smoke remains, the charred earth, blackening where what's left becomes a bruise. becomes a scar. Take a breath.
They say when you experience severe trauma, your mind is split. It puts everyday life into one box and hides the moments you can't comprehend in another. So you can continue going through the motions of living, eating, socializing and dreaming without interruption. But it's not a sustainable practice. The more you live in the box of every day, the trauma you've filed away grows restless, agitated that it's not given the same respect, the same room to be seen and heard, to be unapologetically felt. Like a tumor, it fattens over time, leaks toxicity into places it doesn't belong. It sours the everyday until there's no more room to move. The more you live in the box of every day, suddenly and unexpectedly, it explodes. Acid rains down on everything you hold dear and interrupts the cycle of what you can and can't handle. You are thrust into the wrong part of your brain, the part that was meant to remain unseen, and you are forced to cope with the previously unsurvivable. Even worse still, or perhaps better, depending on what side of the wall you reside. With long-term, repeated severe trauma, instead of arranging memories into boxes, the mind fractures into several parts of identity. It's no longer a matter of when you will get the opportunity to heal, but a matter of if you ever will. One part of you grows up in ignorant bliss, and another part of you is constantly running away, like a stuffed bunny on a greyhound track, destined to barely escape the chomping maws of predators for as long as they live. Another part of you grows up in a responsive fight, always alert, fists at the ready to tear down anybody who gets close enough to administer pain. There can be any number of identities living between the thick walls of dissociation, and you may never truly know how many parts exist. It's extreme compartmentalization, garnished with amnesia, for the long-term endurance of a vulnerable child. 1.3% of the world's population live like this. That's approximately 78 million people. It's as common as people with naturally red hair, which means if you've known a ginger, you've also known someone fractured into several identities living in the one body. However, they may not have known themselves. That's the game of dissociation, uninterrupted unconsciousness. One fateful autumn night in 2018, our partner at the time introduced each of us to the other parts of self. It took years to digest the news. It was like experiencing a deep loss, the loss of the person we thought we were and would become, and a period of mourning for the selves who suffered through hell on earth, for the child within who never grew older, for the one who had only ever known abandonment and isolation, for our inner caregiver who's never known a moment of rest. The 7 stages of grief took us in all its glory: the denial and disbelief, the guilt, the anger. I'm glad to tell you we've learned to navigate this new normal, achieved a state of acceptance and peace. It certainly wasn't easy. Parts of me have harmed this body we share, with razor blades, liquor, and heartbreak. I don't blame them. Coping is coping, no matter how unhealthy the means. We made friends with the dark, realized we were born from threats of broken noses, empty stomachs, and the kind of loneliness that etches itself into the very core of your being. To rewire our brain to understand that our past doesn't dictate what we do or don't deserve out of life has taken every cell in our soul. When deep damage is all you've ever known, it's hopefulness and the wanting for more that is the most frightful. Taking a stand later in life, telling insecurity and unhealthy patterns to go fuck itself, arguably takes more strength than it ever did to withstand the trauma in the first place. I am proud we are still here. No longer barely surviving, but thriving under the pressure of flashbacks and scars. I used to think happiness was something too far out of reach, a destination I didn't have the skills nor strength to find. But happiness, joy, love, it's peppered into the everyday. It's the small things we take for granted. It's the steam dancing above a morning coffee. It's watching the seasons change through the shades of vineyard leaves. It's the sound of water lapping at the river's edge. And it's the taste of chocolate and strawberries. And if ever again we experience an everlasting darkness like the one we were born to weather, I'd know now that these moments of peace can never truly be taken away. This life we share is messy and confusing and often hurts, but it's always in balance with beauty. I can't control what others say or do to us, but I can control what I hold on to and when to let go. My shoulders are forever bruised from taking on too much too young. I know my limits. They've been pushed to breaking point before. Now I have the voice of an adult, the experience of several lifetimes, and an inner family that is always ready to fight for our right to safety. If I had to do this all again, I would. Being forced to have our mind fractured, split, wasn't fair. But now they are a part of me. And I love me. All of me. Absolutely.
I keep a chain around my wrist. She's decorated in rust and flecks of silver, and whenever I move her, she slowly stains the ground red. When I reach my hands above my head, she screams until I sheepishly lower them, and we force this neutral coexistence. Tonight, I sit by a riverbank. The moon's glow casts a harsh portrait of trees onto the water, and I watch as the leaves dance sorrowfully with the wind. If I squint, I can see the river churning through the ground, darting into the night like a frightened snake. It's a clear evening, stars like a cat's eye pinpricking the sky. A faint smell of storm clings to my nose, and I wonder, when the rain comes for us, will my chain float or sink? Next to me sits a radio, slowly melting into the ground as he screeches out 9 news. Like the chain, he's all peeling paint and exposed metal, with a crooked antenna his flailing limb. When the water knocks on our door, he'll certainly drown too. Maybe that's why he sings so bitterly. He clears his throat. Tonight on 9 News, 20 dead in hospital, another 60 tomorrow, workers strike in Sydney from digging 4-foot-1 graves. Old Mother Earth is getting too hot. Back in the 10s, when Apocalypse was only the title of Hollywood's newest feature, I avoided the riverbanks. Instead, I'd sit inside, waiting patiently from this future I gleaned from teen magazines. And I was a reckless, beautiful young thing, unaware of chains that provoked the sound of thunder. Then the sick started dying, and the world started ending, and I moved to the riverbanks. I think tomorrow isn't going to come, I tell the radio. My voice feels rasped, aching from this age of isolation. You have to hope that it will, the radio barks. Look around you, this is not a dying world. Do you truly believe it's ending? The storm cracks on the horizon. The radio gulps, and I stare at the mud. Hope is a luxury, I tell the radio host, feeling the chain nod in agreement. What good is there in fighting for something so penniless? Hope is a human condition, replies the radio host. You're compelled to hope, as you are to swirl your feet in the river. You don't need to be attached to this fear of the end. Glancing down at the river, I flex my legs, feeling the water lap slowly at my skin. There's a certainty to the end. The chain pleads for it, and the radio preaches it, and I sit, debating my position. Who am I to hope for a pleasant future, to self-sabotage to make the end that much more painful? But then again, what if I am wrong? To accept the end as one would an abusive lover? What if tomorrow comes? Perhaps there is something in the future, something more worthy than waiting for flooded rivers. I find myself looking around at the world. The water whispers as it races down the stream, and the bugs listen as they flirt with the shrubs and bushes. Mud purrs from underneath my fingers and parts as I draw strange patterns. A warm night's breeze ruffles my clothes, musing my hair and distorting the radio's voice. The earth feels alive, a song so sweeter than what the radio preaches. Maybe there is life beyond the end of the world, if I dare hope for it. Pull my feet out of the water, wincing as they ache for misuse. Deer-like I stand, and slowly unwind the chain from my arm. She uncoils in thick chunks, and I struggle to lift her before releasing her into the water. She lets out a gurgling sound like an aging opera singer taking her final bow. Stepping backwards, I turn before she hits the riverbed, away from the storm and snarking water. Mud clings to my feet and my legs shiver, but the night air pats my back and I find myself smiling. Unburdened by an attachment to the end, my wrist suddenly feels softer, almost alive again. A standing ovation trickles from the radio. I pick him up, happy to have him live on my porch. We may coexist. Before I can change my mind, I march up to the house. Because the world doesn't end, it just feels like it does. There might still be hope.
This breath tastes of butter and desire. The chef loves the waitress, his wife is on fire. The pancakes are desperate and joy's in the bacon. There is less sex in the bedroom than in the air of the kitchen. This breath hasn't touched the movies in 10 months, a year. You always feel seen by the people looking back at the people who have paid to see lives they can't live for themselves. This is where children can dream and be exciting things. I know I dreamed of Spider-Man. This breath tastes like death. There are only a couple left. The chest rattles rolling pins inside a kitchen drawer. There's urine in the air, bleach on the floor. The mouth gapes open and breathes 1, 2, 3, a couple more. This one ain't breathing too much anymore. This breath smells like pussy and grapes from that picnic we had on the beach. Skin against teeth, against lips, against skin, and finally, back to the skin. The wind was so sharp in my cavities that I almost forgot to smile and drove straight from the sand into the sea. This breath is Egyptian air blowing hard through the desert to the sun. The buses are blown by the side of the road and the poor girl is overheating. There is no shade by Egyptian roads, only goats and sand, and today a young woman with a man, and she will not believe him when he says they won't die of thirst and exposure.
White ribbons float hypnotically on a gentle breeze. Each sheet is so supple, so fragile, and yet so dependable. He tries to reach out, to wind some lengths of the precious tissue around his hand like he once did. Like he did before the world went mad. Smash! Lenny woke with a start and was showered with shards of glass. He jumped to his feet, bareback sticking to the leather couch, and stumbled to his shattered window. Piss off, you looting bastards! The group of teenagers fled in different directions, amidst blaring car horns and angry mobs, disappearing into the chaos of the streets. Lenny, hands trembling, picked up the brick missile and in the broken glass glimpsed his dishevelled reflection. Bedraggled black locks hung unkempt like the weeds that grew through the city's median strips. His pale blue eyes were red-rimmed and swollen from lack of sleep after a long night shift driving the garbage truck. A frenzied knock bashed against Lenny's front door, and he clunked back the bolts to reveal his best mate, Frank. "The city's gone mad!" Frank shrieked through a COVID mask that sat crooked on a scruffy brown beard. He yanked Lenny closer to his big frame and eyeballed him with frantic green eyes. "You're telling me," Lenny stuttered, nodding at his demolished window. "We gotta get out of here, mate. You know what I'm getting at. We need to head west." For a long while the two had dreamt of leaving the volatile city, a place where neighbours turned on neighbours, businesses crumbled and unemployment rates had skyrocketed. Frank's Aunt Margie lived on the west coast and according to Frank was willing to house them. "Come on, Lenny, look at this shitbox you live in," he said, snorting in disdain as he ran his gaze over the tiny space. "It's less hygienic than a COVID testing clinic. You've got nothing to stay for except a dead-end job." "That's more than most," Lenny retorted nervously. "At least I'm not sleeping under the overpass, eating rats with the masses." Seeing the hesitation on his friend's face, Frank added, "Aunt Marg reckons she has toilet paper stockpiled." They packed Lenny's sun-worn Ford Falcon, nicknamed Carol after the librarian from whom he bought it, and sped towards the market. She screeched past riot squads and flaming car wrecks like her namesake between bookshelves. The market swarmed with desperate bodies, and a large mob waited in the loading bay to raid the produce trucks. Lenny pushed to the front, and was amongst the first to bolt inside a T-Logistics semi once the trembling driver unlatched the door and dove for cover. He managed to get his hands to a few bundles of toilet paper before being tackled to the ground. The writhing weight on his back threatened to crush him, until the butt of a walking stick descended to pull him from the tangle of limbs. With a wicked grin, the old lady on the other end rapped him sharply on the forehead, snatched the rolls, and shuffled away. "Hee hee," she cackled under a COVID mask. "Bad luck, loser." Frank had not fared much better, and together they had amassed some measly food stocks. The fruit and vegetables sported bruises to match the lump on Lenny's forehead. "This won't last a day," Lenny groaned as he sanitised his arms. "Think skinny," Frank winked. "Aunt Marg will stuff you full of her famous wild peach pie, and then you'll be groaning." Barren plains hollowed by salt basins grew into rocky outcrops and ranges of stony hills teeming with wind turbines and zigzagging fences. Eventually, the broken pastoral land gave way to an endless sea of saltbush and mallee scrub, too dry for most inhabitants bar kangaroos and reptiles. Lenny, enchanted by the emptiness, glued his eyes to the window. Carol clunked and shuddered as the bitumen deteriorated, then turned to dirt. They passed through a small, neat town of timber and stone where a family played cricket on the street. The parents smiled and their daughter waved as she chased them, laughing as she ran. The chimneys were in their rearview mirror when a strip of saluting cacti marked the end of their journey. The prickly guardians lined a corrugated driveway and pointed to a mud brick shack atop a shrubby hill. A plump figure clad in thick leather leant against a cactus, impervious to the spikes. "Boys," she gushed, removing her straw hat to reveal a sleek mane of grey hair. "You finally made it." "I'm Marg, mate. Bring it in," she exclaimed, knocking back Lenny's handshake and pulling him into a warm hug. "And take those silly COVID masks off. No need for social distancing out here." Inside, Margie offered them beer and a house tour. Floral artesian rugs radiated warmth from a corner fireplace, which, combined with the sweet smoke of lemon-flavoured incense, made Lenny drowsy. He shuffled sleepily behind Marg as she explained her abstract driftwood sculptures that hung haphazardly from the hall. Then, through a doorway of thick timber sleepers, a flicker of white halted him mid-stride. Could it be? The tissue was 3-ply and patterned with leaves the colour of autumn. Fine workmanship indeed, he thought as he rubbed it against his cheek and felt the supple grains move smoothly over his skin. It smelled of sanitation, freshness, and was that oak, or perhaps maple? "Lenny?" came Frank's concerned query. "More like Tutankhamun," Margie giggled as she eyed the sheets draped over Lenny's shoulders and head. "It's okay, son," she cooed, immediately regretting her taunt. "You and your bum are safe here." Past her motherly smile and through an iridescent window mirror he saw nothing but the empty desert and its sentinels, towering cacti. Lenny relaxed his grasp on the sacred cloth. He believed her.
All my life, I have lived in a little town. This little town. I have ridden my bike barefoot down the road at dusk, helmet abandoned on the porch, a gentle summer's breeze caressing my cheeks and playfully tangling my hair. I have stolen down to the little cove by our house, giggling friends in tow, shivering at the cool bite of the moonlight-bathed ocean as we held competitions of who could brave the cold for the longest. Memories made in a little town where nothing ever happens. The worst danger we face is falling victim to a ragtag group of amateur thieves, attempting to escape the monotony that comes with living in this little town. We are too insignificant and isolated for the problems plaguing the rest of the world. At least, that was the way it used to be. Now, in this little town, where I fell asleep to the rhythmic drumbeat of rain falling on tin, sickness is rife. Seeping under doors and stealing through forgotten windows, an unwanted visitor that will not be refused. Fear breeds and spreads faster than the virus itself, infecting populations and causing mass hysteria, reverting us to our animalistic instincts to survive. Teeth bared, naked claws gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights, an unhinged glint in the eyes, like that of a cornered stray. One thing is clear, people will always be frightened of the unknown. Anxiety is fueled by speculation, wading through pages of information to find something credible, like trying to sort strands of coloured wool in the dark. But it is impossible when the facts are forever changing, desperately grasping in the darkness for answers that seem unobtainable. Freedom was taken for granted. Now restrictions ebb and flow like the tides. Never have the lines on a map defined us so much, keeping people in and shutting others out. Quarantine spreading another virus, loneliness. The foremost symptom being fear of isolation with only oneself for company. Even that reached us here, in this little town.
In this little town, where cubby houses were constructed on the block across the street, fire rages, reckless and wild. Our refuge may be tucked away, protected from the reaches of the vicious blaze, but its ashen shadow cannot be contained. Smoke sits heavy and thick in my mouth, leaving behind a chalky taste, a ghostly fist tightening around my throat.
It bleeds into the house, colours the sky. Polluted clouds hanging on an angry red horizon. Ash falls like poisoned snowflakes, delicate and dead, twirling gently in the air and raining down on the grass. A corrupt blanket of snow made from other people's loss. Lights flicker off and televisions fall silent, the lull before the storm, a peaceful state of oblivion, before the hum of electricity returns and we are forced to face the damage that has been inflicted. We are lucky, not all can say the same. Fire always takes so much before it can be tamed, and this little town can still burn.
In this little town, where I had picnics at the park and burned my feet on the rubber mats of the playground, rain drowns the streets. Floods tear through, watery fingers dragging cars and debris in a violent dance. Cars float in their parks, makeshift boats in a churning sea. The heavy downpour creating craters on the surface the size of my fingertip. Even the torrential rain cannot keep summer at bay. Heat radiates through the thick storm clouds, the humidity uncomfortable and dense on my skin. The smell of this rain is different too, warmer and bitter, stinging my skin as it fires down from above. The grey waters leave a wake of destruction, spilling into stores like water through my fingers, spoiling anything in its path. I am used to the rain. It is frequent here. It is rare to go many days without the familiar pattering of droplets on the windows. Hours are spent tracing the spidery veins that trickle down the glass. But that rain is different. It nourishes our town, helping it to grow, not trying to wash it away. All my life I have lived in a little town, this little town. I've watched the fireworks from the same spot of sand every summer. Sparklers in hand and glow sticks stacked up my arms in neon displays. I've eaten greasy seafood takeaway from the same shop on the corner of the street, under the lamppost in a car park by the water's edge on a Friday night. I have stolen down to the little cove by our house, giggling friends in tow, shivering at the cool bite of the moonlight-bathed ocean as we held competitions of who could brave the cold for the longest. Memories made in a little town where nothing ever happens. But time runs on. Memories remain as memories without any chance of repetition. With time, it is growing harder to tell who is changing, me or this little town.
When we're tired of feeling the wind blow, the socks are falling off, brains are blanking out and roofs are caving in, wind blow. We've got to know. We'll fly. Someday. Right now, it's drowning us. So roam. Forwards, backwards, to inner space. Escape and laugh always. Don't cry. Shrivel up and die. Go with gusto. Rummage and rip. Gather and soothe the mind, pretzeled. Patch the heart, punctured. Release us from the choking hold. For healing lacks a sunny face, a pretty place. Healing's feeling, blood pumping, comforting. A reminder, we were okay and we will be again. Until it's back, climb into the filing cabinet. Devour pen filled with heart and recognition. See treasured past on curling paper in all its dusty, rose-coloured glory. And imagine being entirely candid like we were when living was just beginning. Seek sincerity once again. soak in a warm, frothy bath. Pure light radiates from good souls, the teddy bear coach and jolliest gardener, warrior woman and soothing rocker, dentist equals friend, the teary dance judge too. They are our change makers. We're captivated, almost unconscious, by a sexy shadow at the shiniest hour. The rose garden, from the ageless pages of a storybook, laying on the sweet grass with no mozzies, no worries. Heaven's Art Museum, enchanting stories of companionship, fight and utter chaos, flowing skirts, painted canvases, Benny and the Jets in person and on piano, an orgasmic melody, nonsense lyrics. Tummies full, bubbly tomatoes, 9 p.m. buttered toast, sugary drink burping, mud cake mess, a cheese stick or 3 in bed, double bed, fresh sheets too. Rejoice in running gentle fingers through freshly cut hair, trampoline jumping, raucous cards among reunited friends, cinema silence, an honest, crushing hug. We'll fly, someday. There's an hour to face it, to be strong and loud and articulated, but today is not that day. Today is for belief and for bliss and for breath.